Bethlehem IDA in-person meeting. We've been meeting regularly over Zoom for the past 18 months. It's a pleasure to be back in Town Hall and to see faces. Thank you all for continuing to be committed to the organization through some tough times. And I specifically want to welcome Kate Hedgeman, who's been with us since May of 2020, but we're meeting for the first time in person this morning. As Vice Chair of the IDA, I am stepping in to run this meeting, with the exception of a section that Tom will handle after the resignation of Frank Venezia, our outgoing chair. The first item on the agenda is the call to order and roll call. So, see Kate Hedgeman, Dave Cadera, myself, Victoria Storrs, Tim Minichia, and Dick Kotlow are present. This is a quorum for the IDA. We have 5 out of 6 current, total 7 members. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our May meeting. I have one small typo that I ask be corrected in the final version. Section 4, approve revisions. At the end of the first full paragraph, appointment should be appointments. And that's all I have to say. Are there any comments, questions, or other adjustments to the minutes from May? May I have a motion to may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next item of business is the discussion and election of a new chair and also a vice chair for the agency. Later on in the meeting, we will be working through governance committee agenda items, which will incorporate discussions and elections of treasurer and secretary, but we're going to handle the chair and vice chair first as its own items. I'll turn this over to Tom.
As Victoria said, Frank Venezia resigned as a member and as the chair of the agency. The members have the responsibility to elect officers and to elect a new chair. And the purpose of this item is to introduce a discussion of the election and how you want to proceed. So the floor is back to the members.
Do we just propose and?
Well, I'd like to step in first, if I may. As vice chair, I am asking the members to elect me as chair for the IDA, and that will create an open position for vice chair, which is also extremely important, and hope to resolve both of those this morning. So the first thing I want to do is thank every single member and Tom for taking the time over the past couple of weeks to speak with me, to share your insights and your goals. It was a great opportunity to get to know everyone a little bit better than I have in the past when we meet at the meetings, and so I'm grateful for the time that you have provided. And I'd like to say, as someone who's asking to be elected chair this morning, I would like to say just a couple of things about me and why I am asking the members to elect me. But I will be brief. So first of all, Frank called me just over 2 weeks ago to let me know that he was stepping down, and he strongly encouraged me to step up. And a couple of the reasons for that I've been reflecting on in the past 2 weeks, I have served the IDA for 9.5 years, including a couple of years as vice chair. And in that role, formally, as I have this morning, I've stepped in when Frank hasn't been able to run a meeting. But we've also spent more time on the phone and behind the scenes talking over issues. I was able to be a sounding board for for him, because I'm an economic development professional, I was also able to bring additional perspectives and, help him focus where he wanted to go, be able to bring things to the members so that we continued to function very well. And in the course of those years as vice chair, and in fact in all of my tenure at the IDA, I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from all of the other members, and it's an honor to serve with all of you. My professional background, I realized when I checked up on all of the biographies, Robin had asked me this spring to update mine, and this process has put a little bit of a fire under that. But I think it's worth mentioning for the members' consideration briefly this morning is that I have been working with municipal governments directly in municipal finance or as an economic development consultant for well over 20 years. And that's a lot of time listening and learning and working and guiding in the municipal arena. This spring, I left the larger economic development firm where I had been working for more than 5 years and founded Stores Associates, LLC, which is an economic development consulting firm, continuing to do that work, and I am still spending a lot of time watching what's going on in economic development, working with clients to solve problems, paying attention to and communicating with leaders in economic development in the region and the state to get those perspectives. So I'm somewhat uniquely positioned to see what's coming and how other communities are approaching some of the same issues that face the town of Bethlehem, but especially that face organizations such as industrial development agencies or related organizations that I work with in other states. And when I am working with those agencies, we spend time, guiding policy, evaluating tools, financial analyses, a lot of the things that touch on what this IDA does. So just through the course of my professional work, I hope to continue to bring that background and that intelligence of what's going on before the members to help us be very prepared and very thoughtful when we are asked to act. I know that in the next few months there will be a couple of major changes at the town level that will touch on the IDA, and I have great confidence in this board's ability to understand and continue to play an excellent role. One is the town will be completing its comprehensive plan, and the town is currently looking to replace Liz, who stepped down as our economic development coordinator. So we're looking forward to a couple of very positive events in the town. And I would then ask, I've spoken with everyone, are there other thoughts or questions that have come up since I spoke with you that you'd like to ask this morning?
I would just like to thank you, Victoria, for the outreach. I enjoyed our conversation and appreciate your willingness to serve in this important capacity.
Thank you, Tim.
Do you want to put it to a vote, or?
I'm content with that.
Should we nominate both of you at the same time, or? I said, should we nominate both Victoria and Kate at the same time for chair and vice chair?
Well, I probably should mention that when I spoke to Victoria this week, we talked about a lot of different things. I had decided that I would serve, if elected, as vice chair. Just in my practice as an attorney, of course, I represent a lot of economic development authorities, including IDAs and LDCs, land banks, I know my way, thanks to Joe Scott, around pilot agreements, and of course, governance is a huge piece. I do a lot of governance training for public authorities as well. One of, I think, my strong points is building consensus around issues, and I think that's important, that there's an open dialogue and building of consensus about, particular votes or things we want to do. And, I would hope that, as the town continues to develop a vision for the future of economic development in the town, that, we explore things that are different from the past, and really take a look at how we can best support the Economic Development Office. And that would be my one goal, is to increase communication and be in a support role to that office.
Well, I'll be the first to thank Kate for offering to step up as vice chair, and she's entirely correct. We had a couple of good, productive conversations. And if the members are in agreement, I look forward to serving with her.
Can I feel very comfortable doing this and hope I'm in order, but I'd like to nominate Victoria for chair and Kate for vice chair. That's a motion, I guess.
I'll second that motion.
We probably should split up the election so that we have enough votes, because we'd have to recuse ourselves from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a point of order, we have a motion for nomination. We would vote on the nomination. The members who are not, that's 1, 2. That doesn't actually give us a quorum to pass the nomination
Right.
as a resolution, if we both recuse ourselves. So,
No, you only recuse yourself for your own election, I would think.
Correct. Right, that's why I wanted to split them up. So you'd have 4 for each.
Making it into 2 motions.
That's fine.
Correct. So if you'd
That's
like,
why we have Kate.
if you'd like to revise your motion and do Vicky,
I do.
unless you have to swear the vice president in case the president gets killed.
Yeah.
No.
all right, that's an
So
unnecessary
there is a
complication.
motion to elect
Victoria, and then a motion to,
Tim has seconded that.
Which I will second that restated motion to elect Victoria Stores as chair of the Bethlehem IDA.
All in favor?
aye.
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 Now the second motion. 'Cause
If I captured all of those 4 of the 5 members present, I'm abstaining as subject of the motion, and the motion passes for election. Thank you. The
Second motion,
second motion to elect Kate as vice chair of the IDA.
second that again.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
We'll take, all in favor of the election of Kate?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And oh, boy. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. To step briefly back into formality, the motion to elect Kate as chair also passed. Thank you.
Has there ever been a female chair of the IDA?
I don't know, but we can find out.
I just thought that was yeah, that's fabulous.
It's not common in the state, and from your words and with, I think you and I know you and I work with different organizations, it is unusual. It's an honor to join a fairly rarefied group. Mm-hmm. And, all right. Again, many, many thanks. It will be an honor to serve in this capacity and to continue to serve with such a fine quality board. So let's move on to item number 4, the reports of committees, and the first and only committee reporting to us this morning is the Governance Committee, so I'll turn the floor over to Dave Cadera.
Okay, good morning. As some of you may recall, at our May meeting, we discussed but tabled at that time consideration of establishing a formal treasurer's position and requiring that that position be filled by a board member for a variety of reasons, not least of which is a good internal control. It's a good internal control step. At that time, Dick Cotlow did step forward and asked that he offered his name up for appointment as the treasurer, and so we will have to, as we have just done with the chair and the vice chair, have to introduce a resolution to approve Dick as the new treasurer of the organization. That would require a certain game of musical chairs. Not only would we have to revise the bylaws, Article 3 and Article 5, but we also would have to accept the resignation of Al Michaels as the current treasurer, and the resignation of Dick as secretary and a member of the audit committee. Because Dick is going to step down as secretary, it requires another step that we have to take to elect a new secretary, and Dominicia has again stepped forward to put his name forward as the new secretary, so we would have to approve that measure as well. Because Dick as secretary is stepping away from the audit committee, and Frank, actually we would then need to have a new member appointed to the audit committee, or members, and I've been approached to serve on the audit committee as well as Jared Fink, and so we will need to sort of recognize that we will now become members of the audit committee, and Dick as treasurer will now be a member of the finance committee. All of this, I think, has been, the paperwork has been shared with you, and so I think I guess the question for Tom is whether we need to do these individually or whether we can collectively just agree to these series of motions and moves to reconfigure the membership of the various committees.
I included in the packet a proposed resolution that accomplishes all that with one motion.
Okay.
Instead of a series of motions.
So if everyone has seen the resolution that Tom has provided, and the insert language that would replace the current bylaw language for Article 3 and for Article 5, would open the floor up for discussion of that language, and if there is no discussion, that we then move to adopt the resolution. Any discussion?
So just a question, given what we just went through, where people who were subject of actions did not vote, we now have potentially 2 people who are subject of this resolution. Does that mean, in the interest of consistency, neither of us would vote, we would abstain on this resolution? Because if we do, I think we have a small math problem potentially.
Well, I'm not in my council role here, so I would defer to, I would say no, but.
To be honest, I've never seen that before. I've seen people vote for themselves. I don't think it's been litigated. I can actually state affirmatively that in the IDA area it has not been litigated. So I don't see any harm with voting for yourself on this.
It's also a committee appointment, not an officer position, so I think we're okay. But
Well, the treasurer would be.
It's all, the treasurer is also in, okay, yeah.
I said the treasurer now becomes an officer of the board, and therefore should be treated probably the same as the chair and the vice chair.
All right, yeah.
But as well as the secretary now, we are stating that it is, I believe that they are now officers.
So I would recommend, Joe, thank you, and I agree that it's not a controversial issue, but as Davis pointed out, we did just set a precedent to separate for this morning so that we would achieve a quorum without people being asked to vote for themselves. So I would propose that under the section 2 regarding the secretary and the treasurer, we amend the language so that where it says "and" Tim Minichia as secretary, it breaks into 2 resolutions. And so the first resolution would be to accept Dick's resignation as secretary, that Alan Michaels has resigned as treasurer, and the members elect Richard Kotlow as treasurer. And I am happy to move that motion this morning.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
That's correct. All right, motion passes. The second motion under that is to elect Tim Minichia as secretary for the agency. And I'm also happy to move that motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
One abstention noted,
And one abstention.
courteously.
Dick, I anticipated that you would be coming to all the audit committee meetings. Same as Al. Okay, that's fine. He is, but not as a member, a voting member of the audit committee.
Good.
Thank you for that. We did have 25 years of a chair who was also a CPA, and that was a tremendous advantage. I'm not an accountant, so in spite of the finance background.
Just one more thing.
Yeah.
I think, we passed, are we now going to vote on the bylaw change, or that's been voted on also?
I believe the resolution is effectively amending the bylaws with the creation of the positions and your subsequent appointment to those positions.
Okay, that's fine. I just think maybe it might be the advantage, Madam Chair, or Tom, is that you identify the changes for all the members, because, I think they're key changes. Even this is like Congress. You vote and then you learn.
Yes.
So the changes in the bylaws, if you look at the resolution, Article 3, officers, so we changed chairman to chair. And in the second line, you'll see in parenthesis, each of whom shall be members. That's new language. In Article 5, the changes in Section 3, treasurer, the old bylaws enumerated documents that the treasurer was supposed to keep the accounts, exhibit books, laundry list of tasks for the treasurer. This language was drafted by Dick to permit a member to be treasurer without having to do the hands-on accounting work of the finances. I don't know who would ordinarily do that, but an accountant, a bookkeeper, or somebody like that. So anyway, Section 3 is entirely new, and covers that point, that the treasurer shall oversee financial management of the agency. Those are the changes.
Great. Sorry, administratively, and I can understand why you added the parentheses in the second line in section 1 under officers, each of whom shall be members. From a practical standpoint, I have seen a number of IDAs, and I believe this IDA in the past, the assistant secretary was a non-member, so that it just made it easier, resolution signed and certified, and some bond document signed, so that we only had to chase the chair. The assistant secretary as a an employee or the executive director was typically more readily available. But again, it's only an administrative comment. I'm only adding that for you to think about as you look at this language.
What if we moved the parentheses to in front of secretary and then said assistant secretary?
So to provide a little bit more background, Joe, in fact, I was assistant secretary after Tim McCann moved up to secretary. So in my tenure here, the assistant secretary has in fact always been a member.
You're assistant.
Served that role at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been assistant secretary. But if we move the parentheses back, and it says, shall be chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, each of whom shall be members, and assistant secretary.
Right. So right now prior to this meeting, we had 2 assistant secretaries. So as long as that language does not in any way impede our continuing to have 2 assistant secretaries, one of whom, right now Tom would continue in that role, but I think there's also value in having a member as the other assistant secretary, and I'd like to continue with that.
So are we moving the parentheses back in front of assistant secretary, so it doesn't apply to assistant secretary?
That was my suggestion, yeah.
So we probably need to stay as amended, move to adopt the changes in the bylaws.
I'm happy to do that in just a moment. And this is something that we've discussed in preparing for the meeting, with the assistant secretary named as an officer for the first time in the bylaws. I pulled our prior Article 3 listing the officers and its chairman, secretary, treasurer, and such other officers. With the assistant secretary named as an officer, then to follow the precedent of how we've acted for treasurer, secretary, as well as vice and chair this morning, we should have an election for an assistant secretary. And I'm happy to ask the members if they would like to do that this morning and have a full slate of officers. But I think before proposing this resolution, I would like to hear from the members on whether you want to be able to fill the assistant secretary today or potentially fill it at the next meeting.
It would be my preference, given there is a little bit of confusion here this morning, that we delay any consideration of an assistant secretary until the next meeting. First of all, we don't necessarily have anybody at the moment whose name is before us to consider. And so I think we ought to table any vote on an assistant secretary until we get a cleanup of the bylaws, review those bylaws, and then consider the names of anybody who steps forward over the next 30 days.
That makes sense to me.
Then we have a resolution before us to adopt the bylaws as amended this morning. Is there a motion? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The amendment to the bylaws passes, and we will take up as an order of business at our next meeting, anticipated to be in August, the appointment and election of an assistant secretary. I wouldn't. Yeah.
Joe says yes.
Unless the bylaws specifically say that you can only hold one position, I don't see an objection to that.
Yeah, except Tim. Yes, and thank you for bringing up that point. So we'll take that up in August. The amendment to the bylaws passes. Dave, does this work through your agenda for the governance committee? What do we have
No, we
left?
still have the executive director evaluation issue. As you know, again, I think the bylaws of the IDA and the charter for the governance committee required the governance committee to formally evaluate the performance of the executive director. We have not done that in the past. It was decided at the last meeting again to sort of create a process for doing so. And the governance committee had met, had several discussions, and a draft evaluation document has been circulated to all the members. So I would ask that we discuss that, the document itself, and if there are any changes to that. And then secondly, what would be required is a discussion, at least on the sort of the process of conducting the evaluation. And it's my proposal that and this again for consideration, hasn't really been shared with anybody, is that we conduct any evaluation of the executive director in a similar manner that we do our own self-evaluation as a board. That all the members be afforded the opportunity to confidentially submit their evaluation on the form approved of the executive director. And those evaluations would be compiled and reviewed by the governance committee. We would reach, members of the governance committee would reach a sort of a consensus on the personal evaluation of the executive director based on the individual evaluations that we receive. And that the chair of the governance committee and the board chair then meet with the executive director to discuss the evaluation in a normal personnel meeting, which would be private, and that the executive director then, sign the evaluation, note any agreements or disagreements he or she may have with the overall evaluation, and that we then, as the governance committee, report back to the full board on the results of the evaluation. And if there's any discussion of that evaluation or the comments of the executive director, I assume, and Joe, need your guidance here, that discussion could be held in executive session.
Personnel matter.
As a personnel matter. So really, we have two steps, I think. One is to discuss the document itself, if there's any questions people have, any changes they'd like to recommend. And then two would be some, I guess, directing the governance committee to formally memorialize some kind of actual process that we would follow to conduct the evaluation. And I assume that Kate, myself, Dick, you would still be on the governance committee, that we would then have an opportunity to meet and sort of put down in writing the actual steps that would be required to conduct the evaluation. I should add as one final point that the evaluation, in my mind, should probably be conducted in unison with the board's own self-evaluation, so that at the end of the fiscal year, this evaluation would occur and the process would play out by the end of February, so that we recognize at our organizational meetings and things like that, and to discuss it and take any action that be required at that time. So with that, I guess.
I think you partially answered my first question, which is when would we do this for the first time? Given we're now in the end of July, we would not do this for the year that ended December 31st, 2020. We would do this for the year ending December
Correct.
31st, 2021.
Correct.
It would be the first time through.
I mean, I think that's also fair to Tom as the executive
For sure.
director, since we haven't.
No, it's very,
discussed that.
all of it is very thoughtful, and I appreciate the work that you guys have put in on this. Was there did you create this from a clean sheet of paper, or was there something that you might have
Actually,
borrowed from?
Kate provided some background information based on her experience. We used other existing, IDA documents, and I think the approach I took was that we are not a large, complicated issue, or IDA. We don't have our own staff, that we don't need to get to real granular level in terms of the responsibilities of the executive director, that we ought to focus it more on the executive director's role in managing meetings and the IDA, as well as meeting obviously ethical and governance standards that are required of all of us, and that we keep it at a relatively high level, and should over time specific responsibilities be added to the executive director, or if we each have ideas as to what particular standards of conduct or performance we think the executive director should meet, we can begin to incorporate those down the road into the document. But at least for the first go around, try and keep it relatively high level, see if it works, see if people are comfortable with that, see if it's easier to evaluate the Tom's or any other executive director's performance, and make any changes and modifications as we need to down the road.
Thank you, and for those reasons, I'm comfortable with what you guys have proposed here, and look forward to seeing it put into place.
Are there any other questions or recommendations on the document that was circulated? I don't believe we need a resolution or anything formal for this process to authorize the use of this tool. But please let me know if the members would like to memorialize this in some way other than to say, yes, it seems like a good document. And Dave, I appreciate your saying that it can be updated as we use the tool.
I think we're good.
All right. Thank you. Other items or updates from the governance committee this morning? Great. Well, thank you. Let's move on to item number 5, communication.
There were no communications.
Thank you. So number 6, old business.
Rob Leslie couldn't be here this morning, but he gave me his report. There's no report on the planning board update. He gave me a report on the ED coordinator. As Victoria mentioned, the town has reposted the position of economic development coordinator. And secondly, the town was formally awarded another round of micro enterprise grant funds. And Rob says that we'll get the new round of funding up and running this fall with the anticipated employment of the economic development coordinator. End of the report.
Any questions or comments on the planning board update? All right. Item number 7, new business. This is typically where we have the review of the financial statements. It's my understanding that Al will continue to keep our books under your supervision and oversight, Dick. So would you like to lead us through this morning's financial statements?
Our cash position is $445,866. We have prepaid expenses of $2297, total assets of $448,163. We have accrued expenses of $28,431 and equity of $419,732. And as you recall, in our equity, there's still a portion to the end of the year of a balance remaining for our PPE grants, and after December 31st, that would revert back to a non-designated equity position. For the year to date, we have revenues of $56,467, expenses of $65,124, expenses over revenues of $8,657, interest income of $54, which hopefully will do a little better, grants of $500, which we approved last meeting, I believe, for the bookstore, and a net loss for the period of 9103. And if we go to the next one, and sorry, on my iPad, it's all confused because if I turn it, but we're ahead of budget. We've budgeted year to date a loss of about 30,000, and year to date we're 9,000, so we're 20,000 ahead of budget. And as Al has mentioned before, we're ahead of budget principally because our PPE, our PPG revenues, our PSCG revenues are trending ahead of budget. So that's really, I can read it like you guys, so that's really where we are. I think it's positive that we're running ahead of budget, and hopefully maybe if we can close if we can close our Burt Crane, then we'd have some more revenues, and we'd be better off for the year. Nothing more to say.
Also under new business, and it's not on the agenda, Tom and I talked about Frank's departure, and the IDA has not changed chairs in 25 years, so we looked to the modest action that the IDA took when Joe Richardson retired after so many years of service, and Tom updated a letter. It feels, as it did for Joe, that it's not enough to thank someone for their service, but I'd like to read this into the minutes, and we'll send it to Frank, because I really do want not just the members, but the entire town to understand those years of dedicated, effective leadership that kept the IDA running smoothly for so very long and made it possible for each of us to join a really strong organization. So this is dated July 28th, 2021. It's on our letterhead, still showing Frank as chair. Dear Frank, on behalf of the members and staff of the Town of Bethlehem Industrial Development Agency, I thank you for your extraordinary contributions to the agency over 25 years. We are indebted to you for leading the agency year in and year out through projects big and small, through difficult problems and cutting-edge issues, always balancing the need for economic growth with the needs of our community. This This agency is also indebted to you for helping the agency to successfully navigate the regulatory oversight of the past 15 years. We will miss you and wish you the best. And it's signed sincerely, Victoria Stores. I'm happy to amend it to reflect the good wishes of all of the members if you wish. Right. Thank you. I will revise that and send it to be included in the minutes. And I think that ends any new business that I wanted to introduce. Are there other items of new business that the other members would like? So the next item is future meetings. We will have a regular meeting on Wednesday, August 25th here at 8 a.m. And then in September, we revert to our Friday schedule and anticipate that barring any opposite advice from the town, we will continue to meet here in person. I would like to take a moment and preview what we see is on the agenda for the August meeting. Thank you so much for your patience working through a series of changes in the officers. So there's two things I want to point out. Dick, a little while ago you mentioned that it is appears acceptable for an officer to hold a couple of positions, for example, a chair position. So I do want to point out, with regard to assistant secretary, we do not have a resignation from Kate, who currently holds that position. She's also holding vice chair, and so I will accept guidance from our council and, of course, Kate's preferences, whether it is appropriate or whether she wishes to resign from acting secretary, and we can take that up next month. So at this time, barring recommendations otherwise from council, I would consider that we have a full board of officers, and at their wishes, we can raise it. The other item related to a complex election that we undertook this morning, and also having a new member joining us, and then yet another new member, I would like to have a discussion item on the agenda for August to give members a chance to ask questions about the election procedures, about succession, and how changes in agency governance are undertaken. It has been a long time, and I want all members to have the opportunity to ask questions, be comfortable. If there are any issues that you'd like to identify, you can bring them to the table next month.
Would you like the issues submitted to you in advance in writing? Not.
Well, you know, that's a great question. It would be useful to know so that we have a sense of the time we want to allot and how the meeting would go, but I do not want to take any action that would make any member feel that a question was not valid or could not be asked. So if you want to do it in advance in writing, that's certainly welcome, but you know, it is really critical that everyone feel comfortable speaking at the meeting as well.
Do we think it'll result in a change to the bylaws? Because maybe governance should meet and make some recommendations. I don't know.
What I envision is having a discussion, and if there are issues that governance would appropriately look into, then I would recommend that the members choose to ask the governance committee at that time, please give us more information and insight, and come back so that we have a couple of months to think through, especially any changes to the bylaws.
Okay.
I think under David's leadership of the governance committee, we've had a robust year, and you know, if we have more things to do, we have more things to do.
No, I agree. I think this morning there was a little bit of confusion, I think, based on the fact we don't have and I don't want to stand on process, but there was a little bit of confusion as to how we conduct business for the first time in 25 years with the appointment of new officers. So I think it is important that we sort of develop some kind of process over time that we can adhere to, and that we can amend at any time or choose to ignore if we, as a board. But I think, based on discussions with Tom and with Victoria, I think I'm perfectly comfortable waiting until we hear from everybody next month on their ideas, and then we as the governance committee meet and layer our wisdom on top of that, you know, and ignore what they said and do what we want to do. But, you know, and come up with our own, with a process that we think would be appropriate to follow going forward.
Thank you, Dave.
Before you make a motion or ask for a motion to adjourn, could I just ask, Tom, do we have a date for the Finance Committee meeting on the books?
Yes, in fact, it's in October. This is in response to Governance Committee asking the committee meeting dates be scheduled in the year in advance. And I don't have it right now, but it's like...
I look forward to putting that on my calendar.
Pardon?
I look forward to putting that on my calendar. Thank you.
And the same with the audit committee, since you now have 2 new members of the audit committee.
Right, we have a date for the audit. I mean, the first one is just a scoping meeting, so
Right.
it's a short meeting. It's not and it's in January, mid-January, because that's when the auditors are starting. So it's a date for the first meeting of the auditors. Then the rest of the meetings in 2022 will follow the annual meeting.
Tom, since we've got new committees, could it be possible maybe if we have a calendar so that all of our hats have changed, and so we all know when the meetings are tentatively scheduled for, because we don't have one scheduled for governance yet. Finance, I don't know. Is that the question you asked? I don't know when the next one is. October, okay.
Governance Committee has usually met only once, and that meeting has already taken place. So the meetings that are taking place now are special meetings of the Governance Committee as they need and as they schedule it. They'll tell us when they're going to meet.
And I assume if we have a robust discussion in August on any issue that would be relevant to the governance committee, we would schedule something in August for September, October, depending on everybody's availability.
I'll send an email with the date of the Finance Committee meeting.
I wish you would, please.
October, and the first Audit Committee meeting, which is in January. After that, there are no meetings scheduled. Now,
Okay.
So for discussion at the August meeting, the calendar of meetings, if we could have that memorialized for all of us, that would be great. Also, the current members of the committees, because we have some resignations, we have some movement, so I think it would be helpful for everyone who's looking at our documents to know where we are. Right now, we have a vacancy on the audit committee with your stepping back, and so we don't need a resolution to appoint someone to a committee, but I would like to have that filled out for August, which would mean, does anyone feel passionately about membership of the audit committee, but would like to get that resolved at the next meeting so that we have a full board, that's not the proper word, so that we have a full roster of committees by the end of the next meeting. And hopefully at the end of the next meeting, we will have some guidance from the town on the timing of the appointment of a new member to our board. And we would also want to think about how that might affect committee membership.
Yeah, I do think our charter, and I could be wrong, but I think our audit committee charter requires 3 board members. So we do need a 3rd board member.
Well, before we adjourn,
Yeah.
we can ask if, does someone want to step onto the audit committee right now, if the members are okay with that? I've spoken with all of you. I have a little bit of a sense of how that might go. If the current members of the audit committee, and Dick, your experience is valuable as a former member, want to resolve that this morning, I think we could handle it very quickly.
Who were prior to this morning, who were the members of the audit committee again? Is it Dick?
It was Frank,
Frank.
me, and Tim. Not this Tim.
Oh, Tim McCann, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So now we currently just have myself and Jared.
Yeah. Yes. And we did run, well, Tim was still a member, we did run our last meeting, which is Frank and me.
So we would need 3 members, but 2 members form a quorum, correct?
Correct.
I mean, sometimes we don't have 3 members present.
Right.
So we always have 2 members, as you say, it's a quorum, and we need the quorum in order to have the committee formally act.
Is Jared's on finance? Did I catch that? I mean, is he on any committees?
Finance will be,
I'm sorry, audit.
yeah, Jared is on audit.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I can do it, but we also want to involve the new member too, so maybe we should just wait until we get an appointment?
No meeting scheduled.
Right, right. Okay, so we'll table that until August, at least.
So we'll make a note to make sure that that's on the agenda. We'll revisit the committees, clarify, and hear the news about the new member, and then think about what committee position would work for a new member, given the existing strengths of the board and the different abilities that each committee draws upon from its members. So we're coming up on 9 o'clock, and are there any other items that we know right now we would like to make sure we cover next month? Well, then I would accept a motion to adjourn the July 28th meeting of the Bethlehem IDA.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. The meeting is adjourned.